Jailer SIL attempted to undermine me at my husband Harry's party after we made the joyous announcement of my pregnancy, but her plan backfired spectacularly. The fallout from her actions has not only put her at risk of facing criminal charges but has also led to the dissolution of her marriage. I am a 29-year-old woman who has been happily married to Harry for 7 years. While I cherish every aspect of our life together, there is one significant drawback: his sister, Kayla, who has consistently brought negativity and tension into our household. Initially, I held a positive view of Kayla when I first became acquainted with her. However, my perspective shifted dramatically over time. I have witnessed firsthand her toxic behavior, manipulative tendencies, and pervasive negativity. These traits have compelled me to work diligently over the years to maintain a cordial relationship with her, as I fully understand what kind of person she can be when provoked. The history between my husband and his sister is complicated, and it adds a layer of tension to our interactions. When Harry was just 17, he dated SIL's best friend, but that relationship ended due to the overwhelming pressure he felt from SIL. Fast forward to when he was 23, and newly single, his sister attempted to orchestrate a romance between him and another friend, a suggestion he firmly rejected. This refusal sparked a significant conflict which led Kayla to complain to their parents about wanting Harry to marry someone she deemed suitable. Fortunately, his parents did not heed her demands. When Harry and I met and fell in love, his parents were overwhelmingly supportive, a fact that brought me immense joy. However, Kayla's demeanor towards me remained frosty and dismissive. She would frequently invoke Harry's past relationships for no apparent reason, insisting on comparing me to his ex-girlfriends, highlighting their successes and insinuating that he should reconnect with them. This odd behavior not only puzzled me but also baffled Harry, who would often ask her to refrain from mentioning his exes. In response, SIL would escalate the situation by accusing me of being insecure and jealous. Family dinners hosted by Harry's parents became another battleground where SIL would deliberately invite one of his exes, claiming it was a chance encounter and that she did so out of courtesy. This tactic left me feeling uncomfortable and targeted. Additionally, I noticed her obsessive scrutiny of my social media, even though she did not follow me. My public Instagram account became a source of her irritation. She would be the first to view my stories, and whenever a man commented on one of my photos, she would report back to Harry, complaining that I was posting inappropriate content. What she perceived as inappropriate often left Harry and me laughing, as it was absurd to hear her wild accusations. As Harry and I decided to take the next step in our relationship and moved in together, SIL intensified her efforts to drive a wedge between us. She urged Harry to reconsider our relationship, arguing that I had many flaws and that he could do much better. This comment stung deeply as I had always treated her with kindness, and her words felt like a betrayal. Unfortunately, her behavior escalated further once Harry proposed to me. Instead of celebrating our engagement, she sulked in silence at the announcement party, eventually getting up and leaving everyone in shock. Later, she confronted Harry in tears, expressing her displeasure that he hadn't confided in her first about the engagement, claiming a special right to be the first to know due to their close bond. Adding to the bizarre situation, she sent me a borderline threatening message, instructing me to be a good wife to Harry, as she had always been the only significant woman in his life. The oddity of her message made me cringe, and I decided not to respond, opting to leave it on read, which likely infuriated her further. In the months that followed, SIL's behavior shifted to outright avoidance whenever I was around. Yet, she still managed to insert herself into every wedding-related activity, from dress shopping to bridal showers, where her criticism of my choices became increasingly vocal and unacceptable. Despite multiple admonishments from both Harry and his mother, her negative comments persisted. A particularly hurtful incident occurred during a discussion with my future mother-in-law about the wedding centerpieces. Kayla overheard and immediately launched into mocking my choice, declaring it lacked class and reiterating that her preferences were what mattered more. Her disdain was palpable, and it became clear that she was determined to undermine my choices at every turn, revealing the depths of her animosity toward my presence in the family. Her continuous interference and toxicity cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful time, leaving me to navigate the complexities of family dynamics and the struggles of maintaining my own happiness amidst the chaos she created. The situation had reached a tipping point when Kayla expressed her desire for her brother to marry someone deemed as better than me. Her incessant taunts and criticisms had chipped away at my patience, and in that moment, I lost all sense of composure. I screamed at her, making it abundantly clear that her relentless negativity was no longer something I was willing to tolerate. It was a decisive moment when I declared that she was no longer invited to our wedding. The look of shock on Kayla's face was unmistakable. She gasped in disbelief, as if she could hardly fathom that I had summoned the courage to stand up to her. Surprisingly, even my mother-in-law sided with me, irate at Kayla's behavior and supporting my decision. Following this confrontation, Kayla attempted to reach out to Harry. Her complaints centered around how I had embarrassed her and insisted that he should take control of me since I was to become his wife. In response, Harry firmly stood by my decision, stating that if she didn't issue an apology, she would not be welcome at our wedding. Reluctantly, Kayla sent a heartfelt apology my way, which I chose to leave unread, as I was engulfed in wedding preparations and did not wish to engage in her drama. Ultimately, she decided to attend the wedding. Although I could have easily excluded her, I felt compelled to allow her presence to avoid any future backlash or negative remarks. Our wedding embraced a theme centered around soft pink hues and pastels, a vision that seemingly aligned with the tastes of all our guests, except Kayla. To our utter astonishment, she arrived dressed in a long black gown and a veil, resembling someone attending a funeral rather than a wedding celebration. Her presence was jarring, and she went about the reception informing everyone that she was mourning the loss of her brother to another woman. Sensing my discomfort, Harry confronted Kayla about her choice of attire during the reception. She attempted to deflect responsibility, claiming her right to wear whatever she pleased while accusing me of being overly controlling. In the end, both my husband and his parents insisted that she leave when her disruptive behavior continued to escalate. The entire experience was humiliating, and following that day, I made a conscious choice to distance myself from her. When I gave birth to our son, Nate, I drew a firm line, refusing to allow Kayla anywhere near him. Despite her attempts to confront the situation, Harry and his parents were unwavering in their support of my decision, fully understanding my reasons for keeping her at bay. 2 years ago, Kayla experienced a miscarriage with her then-boyfriend, Jamie, a tragedy that deeply affected her and elicited sympathy from both Harry and me. We felt sadness for her loss, particularly because we had already welcomed our child. In an attempt to foster some goodwill, we invited her to our home, hoping she might bond with Nate. Initially, she appeared to be sweet and attentive toward our son, even though her conduct towards me remained strained. However, over time, the old Kayla re-emerged. She continually expressed dissatisfaction with her life, repeatedly emphasizing how nothing seemed to work out for her. Her narrative always involved blaming former bosses and friends for her misfortunes, displaying an inability to accept any fault in her conflicts. It became apparent that in her mind, she was perpetually the victim, consistently seeking allies to bolster her claims. This year, Kayla announced her intention to get married, yet her invitation list notably excluded Harry and me. Harry was taken aback when he learned we had not been invited, particularly given that our relationship had seemed to be improving. When we confronted her about the omission, she claimed it was because she feared I might attempt to upstage her wedding. In disbelief, I questioned her rationale, pointing out that I had never acted in such a way previously. She then brought up her choice of attire for our wedding, dressing in all black, as a basis for her concerns, stating that it justified her decision to exclude me from her nuptials. Anger surged through me as I realized the manipulation at play, and I immediately informed Harry of the situation. In reaction, he discussed the matter with his parents, who decided to take a stand by telling Kayla that they would neither fund her wedding nor attend it if she continued on this path. This ultimatum reduced her to tears, and she began to redirect her blame towards me for causing the rift. Harry countered her accusations by pointing out that she had openly acknowledged her own mistakes and thus had no grounds to shift the blame onto me. In a display of utter defiance, Kayla insisted that our wedding was a distant memory and that I should simply move on. Following the prior events, it became clear that I should simply move on and let time heal everything, especially since Phil and Mill persisted in their refusal to contribute any financial support toward Kayla's wedding. In an effort to mend fences, Kayla reached out to me to express her apologies, desperately pleading for my forgiveness. Admittingly, I find it difficult to overlook the fact that Kayla possesses a certain sweetness and persuasiveness when she sets her sights on obtaining something she desires. In the spirit of moving forward and leaving the past behind us, I chose to forgive her. Kayla's wedding to Jamie unfolded quite successfully, and we all gathered to celebrate the occasion, enjoying ourselves immensely. However, not long after, within a mere 6 months, Kayla found herself back at our doorstep, overwhelmed with complaints regarding the apparent collapse of her marriage. Harry and I, feeling sympathetic to her plight, allowed her to stay with us for several days during which she vented extensively about her husband. The primary issue seemed to revolve around their struggle with infertility, and it was evident that Kayla placed the blame squarely on Jamie for the situation. Despite my attempts to offer guidance or perspective, Kayla remained steadfast in her belief that her husband's actions were the root of all their problems. Whenever she wasn't engaged in lamenting her marriage, she displayed an uncanny ability to focus intensely on our lives, fabricating scenarios that simply did not exist. For instance, I established a routine of hitting the gym each morning before heading to work. On days when I found myself running late, I would bring along my work clothes to facilitate a quick transition after my workout. SIL had taken note of this pattern and frequently questioned my habits. She often inquired about the necessity of my bathing routine and why I opted to go to the gym at all. I brushed off her inquiries, explaining my commitment to maintaining my weight and my aversion to showing up at the office in a sweaty state. She would purse her lips in response, though I could sense her skepticism. Eventually, Kayla and Jamie managed to resolve their marital issues, leading her to return to their home. One weekend, Harry and I were invited to lunch with Mil and Phil, and SIL and Jamie were also part of the gathering. We opted to leave our son Nate in the care of a babysitter, as he often found adult conversations tedious and preferred to remain home to engage in play. As we sat down for lunch, Mil animatedly recounted the story of a friend navigating a recent divorce, detailing how her friend's husband had betrayed her, prompting her to leave and take half of his assets. Suddenly, SIL interrupted Mil's narrative, directing her attention toward my husband. She bluntly asked if he and I had signed a prenuptial agreement prior to getting married. Caught off guard, we paused our meal in surprise as SIL seemingly disregarded my presence, focusing instead on my husband with an expectant gaze. My husband, known for his forthrightness, replied without hesitation that given our successful careers, we saw no need for a prenup. SIL scoffed and proceeded to express her beliefs about the prevalence of infidelity nowadays, suggesting that anyone could find themselves blindsided at any moment. Her remarks were offensive, and I felt compelled to confront her about the insinuations behind her words. SIL began to assert that I was undoubtedly having an affair, citing my habit of carrying a change of clothes and implying that it was her responsibility as Harry's sister to alert him of my supposed misdeeds. The shock of SIL's accusations left me momentarily speechless. Thankfully, Phil and Mil quickly came to my defense, admonishing SIL for her baseless assumptions and warning her against prying into others' lives. Undeterred, SIL insisted that her only intention was to look out for her brother, then took it a step further by jokingly questioning whether our son Nate was truly Harry's, suggesting he bore no resemblance to him. At that moment, I could see my husband's face redden with rage like I had never witnessed before. He locked eyes with Kayla and declared that her inability to become a mother was a reflection of her unworthiness, stating emphatically that any child would be better off in heaven than placed in her care. Kayla sat frozen, her mouth agape in disbelief, while Mil and Phil watched in stunned silence. My husband unleashed a torrent of words, condemning Kayla for her shamelessness and her relentless need to tarnish the lives of those around her because of her own shortcomings. He characterized her as a loser whose days were spent idle while he worked tirelessly to support his family. Rather than directing her scorn toward me and questioning our marital agreements, he insisted that she ought to focus on her own deteriorating marriage, as it became abundantly clear that she was projecting her insecurities onto others. As Kayla's composure shattered, tears streamed down her face, and she turned to Jamie, who sat nearby, seeking support in her moment of distress. Right next to her, my husband positioned himself to offer support, yet he remained silent. I had never witnessed him lose his composure to such an extent before. In the end, she abruptly got up from her chair and rushed to the washroom, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. My husband was visibly fuming, his frustration palpable. Mil approached him, trying to calm him down, while I gently rubbed his hand, offering what comfort I could. He expressed his regret for the hurtful comments made by his sister regarding our son. Understanding the difficulties of dealing with Kayla, I simply nodded. I felt a sense of relief that my husband had publicly defended me, particularly given the toll Kayla's actions had taken on me over the years. After he managed to compose himself, he extended an apology to Jimmy but completely disregarded Kayla, indicating his displeasure. Following that tense lunch, we decided to step back from any contact with Kayla. Her negative behavior had not only affected me but also my husband, so we blocked her on all platforms to prevent any further attempts at communication. Mil and Phil later discussed the luncheon with us, agreeing that Kayla had crossed a line this time. They recognized that their typically calm son had reached a breaking point after enduring incessant provocation from her. It had now been a year since we had any interaction with Kayla, and life had undeniably improved during this period of silence. 2 months ago, in a moment that took us completely by surprise, I discovered that I was pregnant. This news came as a wonderful surprise since we had not been actively trying to conceive. My husband and I felt incredibly blessed at the prospect of welcoming another member into our family. We had been contemplating the perfect moment to share this news with everyone and ultimately decided that my husband's upcoming birthday would serve as the ideal occasion to make the announcement. Mil and Phil were excitedly preparing for a significant celebration in their backyard, intending to honor Harry on his special day. As the event approached, SIL seemed to have learned about the gathering through the grapevine, and to our shock, she showed up. When she arrived, she immediately embraced Harry, expressing how much she had missed him and extending her apologies for their last heated conversation. Sensing the need to address the situation, my husband took my hand firmly and reminded his sister that her apology should also be directed at me, particularly for the accusations she had previously hurled at my character. In response, SIL nodded and turned towards me, offering her apology. She went on to explain that she had been attending therapy for several months and recognized how wrong it was for her to have humiliated me in our previous encounter. Although I found it difficult to trust her sincerity, I refrained from being rude in front of our gathered friends and family, opting instead to simply nod in acknowledgement. Mil and Phil checked in with us, assuring us that they had no prior knowledge of SIL's intention to attend the party. They promised that if we felt uncomfortable, they would not hesitate to remove her from the gathering, emphasizing that the day was meant to celebrate my husband. However, Harry didn't want to create a scene, so we collectively decided to let things unfold without further incident. Throughout the celebration, I watched as SIL mingled and laughed with guests, a behavior that struck me as unusual for her, who typically wasn't so cheerful. Despite her claims of attending therapy, I cautiously chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. When it came time to cut the cake, Harry delivered a touching speech that captured the essence of his gratitude for another year with me as his wife. His words filled me with joy and pride, reminding me of the deep love we had maintained since the beginning of our relationship many years ago. At that moment, Harry and I decided to share our exciting news with everyone. With bright smiles, we announced that we were expecting a baby. The room filled with a moment of stunned silence before erupting in cheers and happiness. My mother, overwhelmed with emotion, rushed over to hug me tightly, while Phil wiped away joyful tears as he congratulated both Harry and me. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and warm inquiries about potential baby names. However, amidst the joyous celebration, SIL stood out as a contrasting figure. She appeared shocked, and I thought perhaps she simply needed time to process the news. But my impression quickly changed when her demeanor shifted, and she stormed off, clearly agitated. Concern washed over me as I feared that she might attempt to disrupt yet another one of our celebrations. Yet, as other guests began to engage me in conversation, I found myself momentarily distracted from the situation. As the lunch service commenced, I rose to assist my in-laws in bringing the food to the table, but both Rick and my parents insisted that I remain seated, urging me to take a break and not lift a finger. I settled back into my chair, feeling the warmth and love of family surrounding me, both grateful and relieved to see such happiness shared on this special day. During this time, I found myself seated patiently, surrounded by the lively chatter of friends and family, eagerly anticipating my husband's return with a plate of food for me. It was a moment of quiet anticipation that was soon disrupted when SIL approached me, her face radiating joy. She held a plate of food in her hands, and with a loud and enthusiastic voice, she announced that she wanted to personally serve me. Her happiness about my pregnancy seemed genuine, and as she handed me the plate, she even made an unexpected comment about wanting to make amends for the times she had been rude to me in the past. I nodded in appreciation, accepting the plate graciously, appreciating her gesture, despite the complicated history we shared. Once she had left, I was ready to enjoy the meal she had brought me when I noticed, with a sense of dread, that it contained shrimp. I have a severe allergy to shrimp, a fact that is well known among friends and family, so I was left in shock that SIL would serve me something that could potentially harm me. Disappointment washed over me as I shook my head, realizing that I needed to take matters into my own hands. I stood up and decided to fetch my own food to ensure my safety. At that moment, Jamie approached me, offering his congratulations on my pregnancy. We engaged in light conversation, but soon he noticed that I wasn't eating. I explained the situation regarding the shrimp. Jamie quickly reassured me. He took the plate from my hands, informing me that he enjoyed shrimp and would be happy to eat it himself, allowing me to procure a new plate of food. I smiled at his kindness, feeling relieved as I walked away to find something safe for me to eat. However, mere minutes later, I was jolted from my thoughts when I heard a commotion. I turned to see Jamie stumbling and gagging, a look of distress overtaking his face as he struggled to stand. Harry and Kayla rushed toward him, their expressions filled with concern. In that moment, Jamie pointed frantically at his plate and then at his throat, and our hearts dropped in unison as we realized something was terribly wrong. The seriousness of the situation hit us hard when Jamie suddenly fainted, eliciting gasps of shock and concern from the gathering. Kayla hurried to check his plate, and when she looked back at me, the panic in her eyes was unmistakable. She asked if I had given my plate to her husband, and unable to find my voice, I could only nod, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. In the ensuing chaos, someone called for an ambulance, and we watched in horror as Jamie was rushed away to the hospital. Kayla's emotional state was palpable. She cried uncontrollably, her glances toward me filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. We later learned that Jamie had been poisoned, and the realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I felt faint as I processed the implications of this revelation. The plate that had been served to him was originally meant for me. Panic raced through my mind. If this was indeed a poisoning, it could have been aimed at me and my unborn child. Harry, Mil, Phil, and my parents had no idea what was unfolding, and the police were soon called to treat the food Jamie had consumed as evidence. The uncertainty of everything was overwhelming and unsettling. As I sit here typing this, amidst the lingering chaos, I am acutely aware that Jamie is still in the hospital recovering. Kayla opted to stay with him overnight, and my husband and I have been inundated with calls from concerned relatives inquiring about Jamie's condition and who might have had a motive to harm him. Mil and Phil are visibly shaken by the events and have chosen to stay at our home, afraid to return to their own. In the midst of this turmoil, I feel a heavy weight of fear and guilt. I am terrified of SIL's potential intentions, knowing that she has no qualms about crossing boundaries. The thought that she could be capable of harming me or my children is terrifying. As I reflect on everything that has transpired, I grapple with the fear of how to reveal that the plate given to Jamie had once belonged to me. Should this escalate into a full-blown investigation, the truth will inevitably come out. My heart is heavy with guilt for Jamie's situation, knowing I should have discarded the dangerous plate instead of allowing him to take it. I am overwhelmed with worry. If something were to happen to Jamie, I would never forgive myself. My husband senses that something is amiss. His hovering demeanor makes it clear he knows I am troubled, though he remains unaware of the darker truth regarding his sister. After posting an update about the incident, I find myself astounded by the outpouring of responses. I never anticipated receiving such a volume of comments in a short span of time. As I type, my hands tremble, and despite the kind words pouring in, sleep eludes me. I feel a deep sense of accountability for what has unfolded. I should have acted differently. The thought of Jamie's well-being weighs heavily on my heart, and the overwhelming notion that my actions, or lack thereof, may have contributed to his ordeal is unbearable. The reality of this situation weighs on my mind as I continue to navigate the shadows of worry and fear, unsure of what the future may hold. I recognize the importance of addressing the situation at hand with everyone involved in a calm and composed manner. While I cannot predict how each person may respond, I must emphasize that Mil and Phil have security cameras strategically placed throughout their property. Given that the birthday celebration took place in their backyard, I am confident that the video footage will corroborate my claim that Kayla was the one who handed me the plate of shrimp. This evidence will play a crucial role in clarifying the events of that day. My intention is to discuss this matter with all involved later tonight and provide an update afterward. As I reflect on this situation, I feel incredibly grateful for the support of my in-laws, Mil and Phil, especially since they are currently staying with us. During dinner, I took the opportunity to gather everyone, including Harry, and inform them that I had something significant to discuss. I paused, inhaling deeply, as the gravity of the circumstances weighed heavily on me. With everyone present, I recounted the troubling events of the birthday party, detailing how SIL had presented me with a plate containing shrimp, a dish that Jamie later unknowingly consumed, leading to his unfortunate poisoning. As I shared my account, I could see the shock and disbelief mirrored in the expressions of those around me, echoing the turmoil that I felt inside. Mil and Phil exchanged concerned glances, their worry palpable, while Harry's face shifted from confusion to anger as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. I went on to voice my apprehensions regarding SIL's motives, recalling her previous attempts to harm me. I admitted my fear about sharing this troubling information, worried about the potential repercussions for both myself and our unborn child. Understanding the seriousness of the matter, Mil, with her practical mindset, immediately suggested that we review the security camera footage. Phil nodded in agreement, fully aware of how critical it was to get to the bottom of this issue. Harry, visibly upset, fell silent, taking in the shocking news that had just been revealed. Once we accessed the footage through their camera app, the truth became indisputable. The recordings depicted SIL offering me the poison plate, followed by the distressing events that unfolded as a result. The weight of the evidence created a chilling atmosphere, leaving no room for doubt about SIL's actions. Emotions ran high as the realization of SIL's malicious intent settled in. Harry, now acutely aware of his sister's depravity, struggled to contain the anger that was building within him. Mil and Phil were horrified by their daughter's actions, unable to comprehend the lengths she had gone to create chaos in our lives. We sat in stunned silence, grappling with the shock of why she would resort to such treachery. In the wake of this revelation, Mil and Phil made the decision to inform the police, recognizing that the matter was far too serious to ignore. Phil and Harry planned to meet with Jamie once he was well enough to discuss pressing charges against SIL. The thought of how Jamie might react to this news filled me with dread, and the guilt weighed heavily on my heart. I found myself unable to eat or sleep properly, consumed by worry for his well-being. I resolved to keep everyone updated on any significant developments as they occurred. As for the updates, I finally returned to share what has transpired over the past month. Despite the challenges I have faced as a pregnant woman during this tumultuous time, I feel it is crucial to provide clarity. Following our decision to present the recording to the authorities, action was taken. After reviewing the evidence, the police arrested Kayla. In a moment of emotional vulnerability, she confessed to her actions, breaking down in tears and admitting to everything without hesitation. My husband spoke to Jimmy about the incident, and he, too, was taken aback by the revelations. My husband urged Jimmy to press charges against his sister, emphasizing the severity of her actions. He reassured Jimmy that, regardless of his decision, he would always be a part of our family. Upon recovering, Jimmy not only chose to press charges but also filed for divorce from Kayla. In the midst of this chaos, Kayla reached out to Mil and Phil, sobbing and pleading for their forgiveness. In a surprising turn of events, it was revealed that Kayla is pregnant as well. She attempted to manipulate her parents by urging them to bail her out, framing it as a necessary action for the sake of their grandchild. However, Phil firmly put his foot down, stating that they would no longer coddle her and that it was time for her to take responsibility for her actions. Mil, while devastated by the situation involving her daughter, recognized that Kayla's deeds could not simply be overlooked. The authorities uncovered solid evidence that Kayla had tampered with the food, reinforcing the need for her accountability for these sinister actions. The repercussions of this incident are far-reaching, and we continue to navigate the emotional aftermath together as a family. She had deliberately tampered with the food, harboring intentions to cause me harm. However, her malicious plan unexpectedly backfired, resulting in unintended consequences that ended up hurting her own husband instead. This heinous act led to multiple charges being filed against her, including serious offenses related to food tampering, endangering lives, and causing physical harm. In the wake of these events, she has been pleading with Jamie, her estranged husband, to refrain from pursuing charges against her, deflecting the blame back onto me and asserting that it was my fault that led to her actions. In contrast, Jamie remains resolute in his decision to hold her accountable for what she has done, fully committed to ensuring that she faces the consequences of her actions. The upcoming court hearing looms, and it seems increasingly unlikely that she will find a way to evade justice this time. As for my son and me, we are managing as best as we can under the circumstances. Fortunately, he is blissfully unaware of the dark reality surrounding his aunt's actions. My husband Harry and I have had discussions regarding the necessity of sitting down with our son to reveal the truth about what transpired. We believe it is crucial for him to understand the gravity of such situations and to recognize that not everyone has good intentions. Although we know it will be a challenging conversation to navigate with a young child, we agree it is a necessary step towards his awareness and safety in the future. In addition to these family matters, I am attending regular ultrasound scans every 2 weeks as recommended by my healthcare provider. We have chosen to keep the gender of the baby a surprise, wanting to have that joyful revelation at the time of birth. My parents are fully informed about the troubling situation with Kayla and have become exceedingly protective of me during this vulnerable time in my life. Their concern stems from a desire to safeguard my psychological well-being throughout the pregnancy, which has prompted them to encourage me to seek therapy. I concur with their viewpoint. Despite my outward appearances of normalcy, I have developed a deep-rooted anxiety since Kayla's attempt to harm me through my food. I find myself plagued by fears about consuming anything that isn't prepared by me, avoiding outside food altogether. Thankfully, my husband Harry understands the emotional distress I am experiencing and provides unwavering support as I navigate through these fears, with hope that I will find a way to overcome this irrational anxiety sooner rather than later. Fast forward to 8 months later, Kayla is now serving time in prison after being found guilty of her charges. I chose not to attend her court proceedings, but my in-laws filled me in on the details, revealing that Kayla confessed during the trial. She admitted to harboring jealousy towards me for years, feeling as though she was an outsider ever since I began dating her brother. Her aspirations had always been for one of her close friends to end up with him, and her feelings of inadequacy were further intensified when we announced our pregnancy during my husband's birthday celebration. Kayla had been preparing to share her own pregnancy news, following a previous miscarriage, and felt that our announcement overshadowed her moment to shine. Fueled by a surge of jealousy and pregnancy hormones, she revealed that she mixed a small amount of rat poison into my food, intending merely to scare me into the hospital, never imagining it would lead to harming me or my baby. She recounted that she had not anticipated I would unwittingly serve my plate to her husband, which resulted in him being poisoned instead. In her perspective, this justified a lighter sentence. The judge, however, did not condone her reasoning and sentenced her to prison, ensuring she would be absent from our lives for a significant duration. Jamie has successfully finalized his divorce from her, achieving his own freedom at last. Over the past months, we have been able to nurture a supportive relationship with him, frequently including him in our family activities. In discussions we have had, I have expressed my sincerest apologies for the incident, feeling overwhelming guilt for passing my plate to him. He has been incredibly reassuring, insisting that it was not my fault in any way. Hearing those words brought forth a flood of tears, as I had been replaying the events in my mind relentlessly, wishing that I could have altered my actions to prevent the unfortunate outcome. Looking ahead, Jamie is recovering well from the turmoil, and as for Harry and me, we have welcomed a baby girl into our family. Despite the shadow of past events, the arrival of our daughter has introduced a resurgence of joy and warmth into our lives. Our son Nate is thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big brother and has been lavishing his little sister with love and affection. Witnessing the bond blossom between our children fills our hearts with immense gratitude. Throughout this tumultuous journey, both my parents and in-laws have stood by us, offering support and guidance as we navigate this new chapter together.